right, everybody, it is the Figure 4 Daily Show, December 10, 2021, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Lance Power Storm is here, joining us today.
We need to be sponsored by Under Armour. We're both wearing shirts.
Damn right I'm wearing my Under Armour shirt today. I'm feeling buff.
Okay.
Ah, look at that thing.
Ah.
I'm actually not feeling very buff.
Me either.
I haven't lifted any weights for a while, but I've done a lot of walking and some kettlebell swings. It's enough to keep me in tip-top winter condition.
Yeah, I've done very little. I actually got a cortisone shot in my right shoulder today.
Oh, man. Maybe it'll make you smarter. Is that possible?
I doubt it. Although, at this point, that's the direction I think I have to go rather than the other way.
How is your wife?
Recovering well enough, I suppose. It's going to be a slow, long recovery. And I think since the last show, we did have an additional hospital visit due to some blood clotting concerns. But everything seems to be under control, and she's improving.
So, not to get into too many personal details, but is the blood clotting issue related to the original issue, or is this a secondary issue that you just happen to notice the same week? Or do we not know?
The general idea is that it is a post-surgery result.
Nice.
I think.
I see. All right. Because that'd be quite a horrible week. Mm-hmm. Two completely unrelated. I mean, it's horrible enough, but at least it's horrible and related, as opposed to horrible and unrelated. Or does it not make any difference?
I don't know if it changes the situation that much or not.
Well, you know, if you have one horrible thing that happens and then there's like a complication and there's another horrible thing, but it gets handled, at least you know that like the second horrible thing stemmed from the first horrible thing. Whereas if you get one horrible thing and then a completely unrelated horrible thing, it's like, what is happening to me? Why are all these unrelated horrible things happening within a week's span? I'm glad things are better.
Thank you.
We got a lot to get into today, including Impact. I made it all the way to the main event of Impact. I didn't watch the main event, but I watched more than usual. Yeah.
You missed the low light of the show. And that's not a shot at the main event. It's actually something that happened. It happened after the main event, not in the main event.
Well, what happened? Let's talk about Impact here first, because I got a lot I got to say about this show. This is a weird show.
And again, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but the close of the show, Matt Cardona ends up standing tall, holding the belt over his head, which is a good thing to do. You're building to a title match at the pay-per-view. He's the babyface in the match. So doing that is great. And then your friend, your favorite commentator of all time, Matt Stryker, compares him, he didn't mention him by name, but talked about having dumbbells and being on a trampoline and always being ready, and compared him to Dennis Stamp.
Bro, I don't know about what to do about this Matt Stryker guy. Like, I just don't know what to do with the guy. Because when you think about it, and he was good once for a short period of time, then he became a gimmick. But, you know, I'm not a fan of his commentary. I don't wish ill on the guy. I don't wish that he would be fired or anything like that, lose his job or anything like that. And to his credit, what I would say about him is that he loves pro wrestling. He's a very, very passionate pro wrestling fan. He clearly loves it. But, bro, I mean, just because you know all about Dennis Stamp and always being ready and the trampolines and why would you bring that up? What does that have to do with anything? That's a negative, not a positive. Dennis Stamp was ridiculed for bouncing on the trampoline with weights and always being ready. He was ridiculed for that. It was not a situation where people went, oh, man, I aspire to be like Dennis Stamp someday, always ready. Did you know he trains with weights? No one said that. They were like, look at this idiot. He's jumping on a trampoline with weights. What a dummy. Why would you compare somebody who's going for the world championship to Dennis Stamp?
Well, I wouldn't, but I can see there is a comparison in that Dennis Stamp was he's always waiting for the call, so he's staying ready. So there is a similar story.
So say the guy's always ready. He's always waiting for the call.
Well, again, Cardona's whole gimmick is always ready. But yeah, it's a case of it's an obscure reference that half your audience isn't going to get. Actually, probably more than half. But those who get it, it's even worse. Because like you point out, Dennis Stamp was the butt of jokes for years after that appearance as the crazy guy that was bouncing on a trampoline.
So I don't got a lot to say about the show. I mean, there were things on it that I liked, things on it that I didn't like. There's a lot of intergender on this show.
Yes.
And that's the main talking point for me. First, we had Deanna Purrazzo and Matthew he needs a new
Raywald.
name. He needs a new name.
Yes.
He had another name for like a week on the Indies, which was like 50 times better, but then he went back to this. But Matthew R., as I'll call him, because I am my grandmother's grandchild, they faced Mickie James and Chris Sabin, and I was fine with this match. Like, I'm not a huge intergender fan normally, but they try to work the matches smart. They don't have the dudes just beating on the women like domestic violence. It's spots. You know, they allow the women to shine and everything like that. But then later on in the show, it was just...
It's bizarre.
It wasn't even that I didn't like it. It was just, this was ridiculous. Okay, I can understand when you do like, okay, we've got Deanna Purrazzo is going to face Eric Young or whoever, okay? She's a strong woman. He's short. They can do their spots together and whatever, okay? I understand when you've got one big dude and one small woman against another big dude and another small woman. They had a match on this show. I am not making this fucking match up. I can't even believe I'm saying this right now. It was the Inspiration and the Influence, which would be the former Iconics, Cassie Lee and Jessie McKay, and Tennille Dashwood and Madison Rayne. That's one team, okay?
Four small women.
Cassie, Jessie, Tennille, and Madison. That's one team. On the other team was Rosemary, Havoc, Crazy Steve, and Black Taurus, who's fucking 15 feet fucking tall and 500 pounds. Two huge men and two women against four small women.
Yes.
What in the fuck was this match? And Tennille's tagging in against the Bull. It's like
how big is that dude? Is he like 240,
He's
250?
fucking Well, I mean, he's in there with small women,
tall,
so he may not be as big as he
thick.
looks. But in this fucking match, he looked like the size of Andre the Giant. Like, it doesn't matter what size he really is. In this match, he looked like Andre the Giant. Him, Crazy Steve, and two women against four tiny women. And Tennille's in there trying to punch Black Taurus. I'm like, what in the fuck is this match? And it wasn't even like a horrible match where, like, you know, they were, you know, Penta and whatever. That Lucha Underground match was just horrible violence. But it was fucking ridiculous. Like, in no universe would anybody in their right mind put this match together. But they did.
Yeah, I think... like even the opener with the intergender stuff, it's like you either ignore that they're women and men and they just beat the living shit out of each other, which I'm not a fan of, or like you say, you know, you carefully construct your spots and you make it okay. But it's like those matches feel faker to me. Like Mickie James and Deanna Purrazzo have a heated issue, but when you're careful to construct your spots, it feels less real to me. And again, this match was just completely absurd, the visuals in it, and it starts feeling more fake to me. And then when you add that to the show, and I'll just jump around a little bit, to the Finn Juice match where, you know, they're working against the Learning Tree guys and they're doing the magician pulling the streamer out of the guy's mouth, and I'm like, okay, this is a lighthearted, goofy, joking around match. And it just started feeling like the whole show was goofy, joking around, because it was impossible to take serious this gigantic bull in there doing spots with, you know, Billy Kay or Jessie McKay, I guess now. And it's just, it was very, very absurd and jarring. And then, obviously, the contrast when you then throw to, which are still, in my opinion, the highlight of the show, the Violent by Design video package promos that are just incredible, serious, dark, deep stuff. It's so weird. And like the finish just came out of nowhere in the 8-person intergender, and it was just so bizarre.
Very wacky. Anything else on that show you want to go over?
Just one thing as a props to him, Morrissey. What the hell? Oh, W. Morrissey. Because this is something I've discussed it with somebody else. When you bring in, for lack of a more complimentary term, WWE cast-offs, guys that were formerly from WWE. And, we talk about it a lot with AEW. It's like, to me, the big thing is you don't want them to come in and, in my opinion, feel like they're the same guy that you used to see in WWE, especially if they're underneath guys. And it's like, when I watch W. Morrissey, I do not see or think Big Cass ever. Like, he feels like a completely different person to me. Now, obviously, they look very similar, but he was, the wacky guy with the SWST soft, and it's like, he's got a different gear, he carries himself differently, he works completely serious and straight up, and I think that's really great in that it feels like any baggage, for lack of a different term, that he has from WWE, it's like he put it away and came in as a new guy, and he's just being a value as himself. And his, big running boots, I assume are like, they look awesome. And I assume they're really safe because Cardona just like fed his face and forehead to the guy on numerous occasions and got booted right in the head. So I think his work and his character personality is a big step up of what he was doing in WWE, and I like that.
Let's talk about NXT and the development of professional wrestlers.
Yeah, you and Dave talked about this, and again, I agreed with a lot of what you said, and it was just, I think there was a few things that you guys were missing as well, in that, you talked about number of shows and, guys that are green that are getting, maybe 30 matches a year in NXT. And when I was the head trainer in OVW, I know that was the mandate from the office, and I completely agreed with it, that they were always on Danny and Jimmy. It's like, they need more shows, they need more shows, they need more shows. And they wanted them to have, at least 2 shows a weekend so that they were doing, 3 nights a week with TV on the Wednesday. Because to me, the only way, once you're competent and know how to execute moves, it's like the only way to learn is on real shows having real matches.
In front of real people.
In front of real people, and not even just the same 100 people that always come to the same building that are in on the joke, if you will, or they do their regular chants. It's like when you go to different towns, that's when you really find out what works, because what might pop the Full Sail crowd may not pop the CWC crowd, or what might not pop Des Moines, Iowa, and it's like working reps and shows night after night in different audiences in front of different crowds. That's when you really figure out what works. And I know in my career, it's like the leaps and bounds of progress I made when I went to Europe for the 5 months that I was in Europe, because I was wrestling, at one point I did, 30 matches in 31 days. And it's like, you just can't help but learn, because the best, and I've said this with any student I've ever had, it's like Bryan, if you and I wrestle on Friday and I point out something that you did wrong and need to fix, if we can go out again on Saturday and you can fix it, it really gels in your head, because the instruction I gave is still fresh. The result of improvement is fresh. But when you have to wait a week, or you have to wait 2 weeks, or heaven forbid longer than that, the learning curve is just so much flatter. And that's where the fact that I don't believe NXT is doing any live events. Now, thankfully, they sent Braun to Europe, which was, extremely smart. But the learning curve, especially now with hiring people that don't have the experience, like, if you throw Sami Zayn in developmental, it's like, okay, you need to brush them up on what you like and how you like to have him play cameras at TV. It's like he can learn that doing one TV show a week, because like the dude doesn't need to learn how to work. But hiring non-wrestling people that don't have indie experience and expecting them to learn doing drills in an empty warehouse and then having short matches once a week or every other week, that's going to be really hard. And then the other point that you brought up, which is absolutely the truth, it's like they need to be working with the Ciampas, the Garganos, the Adam Coles, the Pete Dunnes, the why am I blanking on Vinny's favorite guy, Cameron Grimes? It's like, again, I was just bumbling along as an idiot green guy on the indies, not knowing what I was doing until I ran into Gamma Singh, Johnny Smith, and Jerry Morrow. And I'm just like, holy shit. And they were so much better than me that they brought me up to another level. And they need to have those people. And similarly, I got pretty good. And then I went to Europe and worked with Danny Collins and Fit Finlay. And I'm just like, holy shit. And you get better. And then I think there also is, and this is where the warehouse stuff can be handy as well. Once you get really good, I think there is also now you need to work with people below you and see if you can actually pull people up to your level is sort of another level of even getting better. But if you just have Von Wagner in there with JB or BJ, it's like, who's going to bring the person up to that next level when they're both at it? And it's one of the biggest problems at the beginning of the indie scene now, that when you start out, you're bottom of the barrel, the shits don't know what you're doing, and they book you with bottom of the barrel people that are the shits and don't know what they're doing. And if you get lucky enough to improve, then you can work with someone that's also at the same level with you higher, where working people at different levels is really where you improve. And I think they need to, on some level, get those live events and like you suggest, cough up the dough to pay guys that maybe don't, are late enough in their career that they're not looking to try to make a name and fight and claw and get another push somewhere else or in WWE, that would be happy with a, $250,000, $300,000 a year job where you're just working with the Braun Breakers and the Von Wagners to make them stars and teach them. I think it's a way bigger value for the money than probably some of these next in line contracts are.
If you've been watching Observer Live, we put some new matches with myself up there, and there have been 3, okay? One of them was a match from the YWF, when I had absolutely no training whatsoever. The second was a match with Buddy, and the third was a match with Jack Evans. And if you watch the 3 matches, the YWF match is just like a whole bunch of stupid shit, and there's like no semblance of a match whatsoever. It's just like we just did a bunch of crazy shit. He hit me with a high-angle brainbuster, which I promise you was not the plan. But anyway, you go from that, then there's a match with Buddy in the Temple Theater. And Buddy, if you watch the match, this match is like 1,000 times better than the YWF match, and it's all because of Buddy. It's all because I got to get in the ring and he took my Raw ability and he showed me how to actually work a match. And then the next match with Jack Evans is maybe a year later, and it is exactly what you said, which is me working with somebody now who had maybe 3 months of experience. And it's a pretty good match because, yes, you need to get in the ring with someone way better than you many times. I mean, it ain't just one time. The more, the better. And then you have to work with somebody who is not as good as you and see if you can carry them through the match. 2 people who are great working together put on a great match, but they're already great. 2 people horrible working together, you ain't going to learn jack shit. You can have a match with another horrible person 500 times, and your 501st match, you still fucking suck because you work with another guy who is shitty. And Dave made this comment, and I was talking about, what are we going to do when there's like no Garganos and Ciampas and everything? Like, there's all these green guys working together. How are they going to learn how to work? And he goes, well, there's agents. There's trainers. And he's right. There are agents and trainers, and they are going to help you to a degree. But you would know as good as anybody, Lance. Both of us, we have been watching wrestling forever, working for a long time. You watch a match on television, And you're going to see a lot of things, an MJF CM Punk match, for example. You can watch that match, and you could probably come up with things that you could improve in the match, whatever. But you're not going to see everything. And for example, if you saw a match with two people, there's a lot that you could add. But you're going to be able to add even more if you're in the ring with them. You're going to be able to feel the things that you can't see on television. You're going to be able to feel the timing issues, feel the issues, they push you too hard, they pull you to whatever it is. You have to put them in the ring with somebody very good so that person can then give them better advice. Then you could take Shawn Michaels, anybody. Shawn just watching a match between two guys, he can add a lot, but there's going to be a lot of things he's not going to help him with because he wasn't in the ring with them.
Yeah, and that's why I was always a hands-on trainer. It's like I ran matches with my students. I worked with them because there is something to feeling it in the moment. And that was something just as a learning tool. I did it specifically with Rachel Ellering when she was here because she was doing really well. And it's like I'd have matches with her. And at first, I'm just calling everything, right? You know, literally telling her every single thing to do. And she would do it, and we'd get through matches. And it's like, okay, so she starts feeling confident. And then I would purposely call an open-ended spot that didn't tell her, you know, come back and get my arm, you know what I mean? Or something like that. And I would just sell and leave the ball in her court, so to speak, without actually telling her who to pass to or to shoot. And the first time that happened, it's like she was just lost because, again, she was still in training in green. And I had always told her exactly where to put the ball every single time I gave it to her. And it's like that took her to a next level because she's like, oh, shit, now I got to be able to think on my own. And timing and listening to a crowd and reacting to that in the moment thing, that's where working with that experienced worker on a show, like, again, with Jerry Morrow in particular, when I didn't have to worry about thinking what move was next, or should I do this or should I do that, I could just listen to the crowd and feel and try to pace myself, because if I didn't think of what was next, Jerry would just tell me. But when you're getting the instruction after the fact or a day before the fact from an agent or producer, it's not the same thing. And reacting live and being in there in the ring with those people, it's like the experience is priceless. And anyone who's actually done the job knows that when you work with that person that's better than you, there's just a, oh my God, it's like this was easier, this was why. And it's like you learn so much. More so than when you come back to the locker room and you go up to said vet and go, what did I do wrong? And it's like he'll give you advice and you'll get value out of that. But nothing like actually being there in there with them as they, you know, are actually telling you to fire up, the people are there, come on, fire up. And it's like you, oh, right. And you actually do it and time it right. But if you just get back into the locker room afterwards and the guy's like, remember there when you were in the heat and there was a point where the crowd was clapping, it's like, you need to fire up more. And you're like, and you're trying to think, oh, okay. The second hoop spot or the first one? Oh, okay. It's like, it's not the same thing as that guy in real time telling you. It's like, fire up, baby. They're here. Come on, fire up, feel it. And it's like, it's just a different learning curve. And being in there with guys like that is so valuable.
You know what it's like, Lance? It's like when you have a baby. Before you've ever had a child, everyone gives you all this advice and they tell you your life is going to change and you're not going to have any time and you're not even going to have time to go to the bathroom. And you're like, it's going to be different. Obviously, there's another body, but you have to experience it. Someone can tell you all the shit they want about how to work and fire up and this and that. But until you're in there with someone and it happens, and it is exactly like you say, when you've done nothing but wrestle other geeks and suddenly you get in there with somebody who has a clue, the fucking match is so easy. And it's mind-blowing how easy it is. And then, like, everything changes for you in an instant. Now that's all you think about is, fuck, that was so easy. And then, obviously, that's what you want to do afterwards. But it has to be more than one time.
Yeah. Actually, the baby analogy is so great because I remember both telling people and also being told you don't realize how different life is once the baby can actually crawl, or heaven forbid, actually stand up and walk. Because until they crawl, it's like you put them on the floor and
they don't go anywhere.
And you don't actually have to pay that close attention because they never move
They
more than...
can't do anything.
But that day that you look away for 5 seconds, look back, and like the kid is 20 feet away and there's like, holy shit, and there's this panic. It's like, until it actually happens to you, you don't realize how fast these kids can move and how different your life is going to be.
Let's talk about these NIL deals. Speaking of training.
Yeah, like I think having a couple of these are good. Like if you see a Brock Lesnar or perhaps a Gable Steveson, that, okay, you see him in an amateur program, you realize he's got charisma, he's got a tremendous look, he's a phenomenal, and you get, shit, I think we can make that guy a star. Let's get our dibs in on him. It's like, okay. But I think making your entire recruiting approach, okay, let's sign all of these great athletes that may never have ever considered pro wrestling, don't have a desire to be in pro wrestling. I think you're going to have an incredibly small success rate. I think WWE has traditionally not understood or respected how hard this job is, and I think there's been a feeling that, well, you just teach them how to do it. And like, there's a lot of people that just will never get the job, or no longer or never will have an aptitude for the job. And I think when you're just signing 15 people from different sports and go, hey, we'll make them wrestlers, it's like, I'd be really curious over the next, 5-10 years, how successful, provided they stick with this program, like how many of the people they sign will actually be a success, and how much money does it cost them? I don't know if it was a wrestler or a football player, but I remember Dave mentioning the one guy still got, 3 years left in college, and it's like, are they going to pay this dude for 3 years? And then when he's done, they'll throw him in developmental. And it's like, so you're looking at what, like a 5 to 7 year salary to hopefully have a guy that may end up being as good as a dude you could just, sign out of the indies that has already showed a passion, showed an aptitude, showed a degree of success. I just think it's a real gamble. I think it's expensive. Now, I think there's a PR appearance, which I think would be the appeal to Vince, that it would seem more mainstream, that it's like, oh yes, we're sponsoring athletes from college, and it's like, you feel less pro wrestling. But you know as well as I do that the track record of people that you have to convince to get into wrestling is not really that good, because wrestling's a hard job, the lifestyle's a hard job. Now, granted, the lifestyle's better now, but there's a lot of BS that you have to put up with. And, back when shoot interviews were a thing, it's like, people tell all the horror stories of the crap they have to put up with wrestling, but the stories always end with, how great it was that time you're in that ring, when I wrestled Terry Funk in Amarillo, Texas, it was like the greatest moment of my life. Or again, when you won the Royal Rumble, it's like the wrestling moments, if you love wrestling, make all the rest of the job worth it. But if you take someone that doesn't have a love, potentially, and many of these probably don't have a love for pro wrestling, I think your chances of success are less. And just hiring a dozen big people, I think your chance of success is not good. And I wonder if Johnny Ace's opinion of this is skewed a bit from his days in Japan, where, Japan as a country, All Japan and New Japan had a great track record of taking big dudes that, at the beginning weren't necessarily all that talented and made them big stars. And I can see him thinking, well, you find big guys and you just make them into big stars. Look, we did it in All Japan. We did it in New Japan. But they had Misawa and Kobashi to work with the big men in All Japan. And they had Muta and Chono and Hase and all these phenomenal greatest workers in the entire world working with, big guys to make them huge stars. And I think this is going to be an expensive uphill road. And again, I hope they have some success with it, but I think blending the two approaches of Hunter's and the current version would be the better approach.
You know, I'm very split on this whole NIL thing because I think you need to recruit wrestlers. That's just my opinion.
Like pro wrestlers or amateur wrestlers?
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny because if I were running the company, like I would want to recruit great professional wrestlers, people that were good at the job, and then I figure out how to get them over. But Vince is more about he wants everyone to look a certain way. And the irony, which I've noted many times, is remember Jackson Riker?
Yep.
Jackson Riker, great look. I mean, everything Vince wants in a guy, tall, good physique, et cetera, very inflammatory things that he wrote on Twitter that made, I'm not just talking fans, like the talent was furious at Jackson Riker. They're cutting everyone, they never cut Jackson Riker. Vince puts him on TV because he thinks he's going to be something, calls him up from NXT, breaks him up with the crew, and it was like 4 weeks and he was done. It was like he wasn't a very good worker. And the thing with Vince is he's so into bodies and everything like that, I don't even know if he knows that he still wants them to be able to be good workers. So, and then like the whole thing is, we're going to hire people that have never done wrestling in their lives or even been fans. We're going to try and make them wrestlers. Even though, like, you can look at example after example after example after example of people that looked the way he wanted, but they weren't good workers, and so he was like done with them. Because he actually wants people to be able to work.
But I think that goes back to what I said, that I don't think Vince fully appreciates how hard it is to be good at this job.
No, he doesn't.
And he still, in the back of his mind, goes, well, just have the people teach him.
But, Lance, here is a positive thing about these NILs. So I've been thinking about this. You are taking people that have no wrestling experience whatsoever, and you're trying to train them from scratch, okay? If you look at WWE over the last 8-9 years, and you look at all of the great workers that they had in NXT that came from Ring of Honor, Japan, wherever, the indies, and then you look at the people that got brought up and were like big-time superstars. You got Roman, Charlotte, the Street Profits, Bianca have all been stars on the main roster. There's a huge list of people that had zero experience. They all were trained from scratch.
Yes, but there's a big list too. Like Seth Rollins is a big star.
Well, sure,
Kevin Owens is a big star. Sasha Banks is a big star. It's like these people, Sami Zayn should be a bigger star, but he's
not.
still, but that's their pushing of him. He certainly has the ability to be a big star. He is fantastic at this job. It's just Vince probably doesn't like his look or has a personality clash with him.
Yes, but
there's still a lot of big successes. Cesaro, while he hasn't pushed him to the limit, it's like he's been a success for, a decade or more in WWE, and it's like he worked elsewhere.
But here's my point. You're right, okay? But
as usual,
the names that I mentioned were all trained from scratch to work exactly the style that Vince likes and understands, okay? The names you mentioned, throw out any of them. Take any of them. Seth Rollins. Go watch his Ring of Honor indie matches and watch his WWE matches. Cesaro. Go watch his indie matches. Go watch his WWE matches. Sami Zayn. Go watch Generico. Watch his... The thing that they all have in common...
Generico's a different guy.
The thing that they all had in common was that they were able to adapt to the style that Vince understood. That's why they were able to go up to the main roster. And they also, in the case of Seth, he's tall, and, Sammy's tall, not like super tall, but he's tall enough. They were able to have an acceptable look and be able to adapt their style to the style that Vince likes. So my point is, these NIL deals, if these people have any ability to be trained to be wrestlers, they're going to be trained from day one to do exactly what he wants to see in the ring. And as long as he's still around, they have a chance of making it.
Yeah,
Look at Braun.
But also, too, like, I think it's fair to exclude Charlotte and exclude Roman because they are people that obviously would have seen a lot of pro wrestling, had a degree of respect or love for pro wrestling. They have an understanding of pro wrestling because they grew up around it, where there's quite probably several people on this NIL list that have never watched professional wrestling, don't understand professional wrestling, and that's something that sometimes is a block that's hard to get by when it's like they just don't like, why would you do that? It's like, well, it's pro wrestling, it's what we do. But obviously Charlotte grew up around it. You know, I can't fathom she never watched it. Her dad was like the biggest thing ever in the history of the business. And, you know, Roman, obviously, with his heritage, it's like, you know, how many family members does he have that were in the wrestling business? So that obviously gives them a big leg up when they go to WWE. And I think, obviously, I think that's what they're hoping for with Braun Breaker. I can't fathom that dude has never watched a Steiner wrestling match before in his life.
God, you kidding me? He did a Frankensteiner the other day. Fucking beautiful Frankensteiner. I mean, clearly this guy, everything he does looks exactly like his father or Scott.
Yeah, the Steiner line is just like it's Rick, and the Frankensteiner is just Scott. His promos
Catch
are more
him in
Scott.
midair, hit the power slam, Scott Steiner promos.
Yeah, where, again, he would be ahead of the curve because again, I don't honestly believe that there's a genetic link or anything, but it's like he grew up in, you know, around it. He would have seen it. He would have had, obviously, his dad and his uncle talk to him about it. So he has such a leg up on just, you know, pick one of the men. I don't know any of the people's names on the NIL list, but, you know, it's going to be harder for them.
Let's talk some AEW. What'd you think of Dynamite this week?
I didn't like it as much as previous weeks, and obviously not as much as you. I just listened to you and Vinny talk about it. I think the biggest thing that I want to talk about is the Punk MJF thing, which I actually really, really enjoyed. But I think there is another way of looking at it that I think should be looked at. And I touched on it a bit, I think it was our last show, which I guess was 2 weeks ago, where we talked about you were fine with, you know, Cody being a babyface but being booed, and you cited John Cena and other things. And I said that I think it's dangerous in that the Cena thing and the Roman thing created an adversarial relationship between the company and the fans. And it trained the audience to ignore or not get emotionally invested in the stories being told by the company as much, because it's like, hey, I know they want me to cheer them, but I'm going to boo them. And you have a, what's the word I'm looking for? A dismissiveness to the stories being told. And AEW, almost without exception, has been the other way, that they tell the stories I want to be told in a manner in which I believe, and they have baby faces who I actually genuinely like, and heels like MJF who I actually dislike as a heel. And I think that's great, and I think it allows for a more I'm blanking on a word, a more excited, loyal fan base. So, you know, we've talked about the goodwill that AEW has because the fans trust the company and the narrative that they're being sold. So I think, well, again, I'm 30 years of wrestling and stuff. It's like, if I like it, I'm like, I don't worry too much because I'm not going to get too emotionally invested. I'm, you know, but so I enjoyed the Punk MJF dynamic and the promo and stuff. But Punk has been a very, very popular character that fans truly identify with, believe, and associate with. And MJF has traditionally been, we boo that motherfucker, we hate him. For the sake of one show, they had Punk be completely out of character, bad-mouthing fans and being a heel, and MJF being presented as a babyface. And while it didn't bother me, I could enjoy it. I think there is the risk of fans being less emotionally attached because it's just they're just playing this week. And I think that hurts. And I think it diminishes the value of heel turns or face turns down the road when you're going to do a double turn this week and a double turn next week, assumingly, for no reason. It's like there's two turns. And they also, because I think if you go back, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I would say that Bryan Danielson and CM Punk were the two most popular and beloved babyface characters, with the possible exception of Adam Page, in the company. And on this week's show, they were two of the biggest heels. And I think there is a risk that you make the fans, in order to just enjoy the show, you have to be less emotionally invested in character and less emotionally invested in story. And I think that's a bad precedent, especially in the case of it's just for 1 week, where I don't think it would have been that hard to keep Punk babyface and consistent and MJF heel and consistent. And I think that might be a better approach.
Here is why I think that you're actually a rare, absolutely completely wrong, Lance. You ready for this?
Sure.
Because CM Punk was not a heel and MJF was not a babyface. CM Punk got a heel reaction and MJF got a babyface reaction. But in fact, their characters were exactly the same as they always are. When CM Punk came out, CM Punk was not mad at the wrestling fans. CM Punk, the entire point of his promo was, this guy MJF is a horrible person. He is a terrible person. And if you people like this terrible person, you are terrible. This was a specific statement towards the fans in the building in Long Island. This was not a statement against all AEW fans. He was talking to Long Island. MJF's video in no fucking universe was that a babyface video when he shows up and he's talking about all the chicks that he scored in high school and he's the keg stand chick. This was all Long Island babyface, but a heel everywhere else on the planet. You air that video anywhere else and he's getting booed out of the building, but he gets cheered here. Still, he came out and he celebrated his Long Island fans, but when he did that battle royal, he was a heel from the moment the bell rang to the moment the thing ended. When it was over, he ran down and beat up the babyface, so he was a heel to the core at the end. CM Punk came down to save the babyface. He was booed because he was stopping MJF, but nothing that they did was out of character for that individual person in the overall scheme of AEW. It was 100% strictly about the building that they were in.
Thank you for making my point and proving me right. Because I said that at emotional level, you're thinking strictly intellectually and analyzing each point. But for a lot of fans that just sit and watch a show, we saw CM Punk getting booed and bad-mouthing the audience. And we saw MJF playing up to the crowd and being cheered. Unless you really look and think and watch and analyze, all you do is you see and you feel Punk being disliked and MJF being liked. And those fans, whatever percentage that is, whether it be 1, 2, 3, or 5, they're going to see Punk who they like being booed, and they're going to question their association with him. Same with MJF, which is why I said at the beginning that I liked the segment. I really enjoyed it. Because again, I'm looking at it more intellectually. I enjoyed the promo, but I think there's something, because there's a percentage of the audience that doesn't watch every single minute of the show and doesn't sit down and make notes and analyze and go, well, you know, he only actually badmouthed the local crowd for cheering him. He was presented on the show and the audience was booing him. I think that is dangerous. And like I said, it's not the end of the world, but I do think at an emotional level, there's a percentage of the audience that's going to just see someone being cheered, see someone being booed. And I think it's dangerous.
But Lance, was it dangerous in 1997 when Bret Hart would go to Canada once a month and the Raw fans would see him cheered wildly in the building and whatever American babyface showed up was booed out of the building? Was that a dangerous situation where the fans were horribly confused about what happened? Or is that what happens when a heel goes to their hometown? Like, do we have to keep the heel out of the building when they go to their hometown because they're probably going to get wildly cheered by their hometown crowd?
Two differences. Bret Hart wasn't 5 weeks back. Like, Punk just got here, and he's just being beloved. And it's also a one-day thing where WWE was working Canada back and forth a lot. It was a storyline for, over a year. This isn't a year-long storyline to rally two fan bases around this character. This is a Well, we're in his hometown tonight. We will make this change one time for one day. And again, dangerous is a huge overstatement. But I do think with Cody fighting the audience's feeling for him, Bryan Danielson turning for no real reason, and this Punk thing, I think together you have to be careful. Because I do think you want the feeling that AEW's baby faces are who you like, their characters are in sync with who you believe. Because again, I think that is the biggest problem with the WWE product, is that it's like you like a lot of the heels and you don't like the baby faces, and there's a dissociation there. And I thought AEW, up until recently, was batting 1,000. You know, maybe now they're only batting 900, which is still a hell of a batting average. But there's a few instances now where on the show, they haven't been presenting people the way I deep down felt about them. And I just think there's...
So what happens when CM Punk inevitably turns heel and they're going to run Chicago 4 times in 4 months like they have done recently? Does he not appear on the shows, or because you know he's going to be massively over as a babyface when he shows up as a heel in Chicago?
Well, again, you have to make a call. But again, you know, you could argue that, again, if that's 4 times a year, it's more important than this time. And you can still have him completely consistent with his character, but I felt this was going a bit too far. Like, he came out purposely trolling the whole hometown crowd before any reaction happened. He decided to snub the hometown crowd by playing MJF's music. I think that's different.
Any other thoughts on this Dynamite?
I really like the Battle Royal, and I've mentioned many times that I hate Battle Royals, and I know Tony has an affinity for them. I thought this was a good one. I didn't think it went too long. I thought there was always something to look at, and what I was looking at was a focused, accomplished moment. Because that's one of the things I hate about Battle Royals, when you're just staring there looking at a bunch of bodies, and you're like, who the hell should I be looking at? Oh, that guy's choking in the corner, someone's doing that. Where this seemed to be laid out and paced really well, where I always knew where to look, and what I was looking at seemed to make sense and forward other things. So I thought the Battle Royal was really good. The main event, I didn't like as much as you. And I was shocked, and I think some of it comes down to the story that was told. I now am looking way less forward to Danielson and Hangman Page than I did when they started this angle. And I think part of it was the match tonight. That John Silver doing the wacky comedy stuff that got him over in the first place hurt the match, in my opinion, because it contradicted the story and made me care less. Bryan Danielson has said, I'm going to kick the fucking head in of everybody in this Dark Order. And he kicked Colt Cabana's tooth out, kicked his head in, knocked him unconscious, then put him in a choke and wouldn't let him go. Then he kicked the shit out of and kicked the fucking head in of Alan Angels. Then he swore he's going to kick the fucking head in of John Silver, and then he's going to kick Adam Page's head in. And then at the start of this match, every time John Silver bumped him, he did his goofy smile and threw the double bicep up. And it's like, you're doing a comedy spot. This guy has kicked all of your friends' heads in. And it lost the emotion to me. And it lost the violence and the emotion in the story. And it's like, if you're going to lose the violence and the seriousness of the story, then you'd have been better off to just keep Bryan a babyface and just have these two great guys have a match. But I thought him acting goofy and comedic, while it is what got him popular in the first place, I don't think it fit to a match where this man has vowed to murder your entire group, has been successful up until this point. It's like, why aren't you taking this more serious? Like, it really damaged him when they said next week, because I remember when they did the first angle where Bryan came out after winning the title contender tournament thing. I think it was at Full Gear. my interest level, and I think I mentioned it on the show, it's like I was so jacked for this match. I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. And when they announced that the match was next week, I'm like, oh, really? And I was like, I just realized that this angle has managed to make me less interested, and I think it's because it wasn't played serious enough. And also, too, I genuinely like and respect Bryan Danielson so much as a babyface. Him coming out and just acting like such a jerk with no real motivation to do so plays into what I mentioned earlier of damaging my emotional connection.
Well, I think that, first off, as several people have noted here, Ryan here, Raymond, they don't think that there was a lot of comedy in this John Silver match. They don't think that the double biceps was meant to be a comedy spot. They think that he has such weird proportions that when he does a double biceps, it just looks funny. But it's not supposed to be comedy.
Why would you stop fighting this person to pose?
Well,
unless you're
knocked his ass down.
But unless you're taking it lightly.
That's the story, though. That was the actual story of this match.
He's taking it lightly?
No, Bryan Danielson said, you would be much further, but you do too much wackiness and goofiness.
And he did the wackiness and goofiness and
got
lost.
Killed. Yes.
How does that help the babyface?
Well, it's not helping the babyface. It's supposed to get over Daniel Bryan for this match with the Hangman. Now, the thing with Bryan also is that, listen, when he showed up, he was a babyface, okay? But in his own interviews, he stated, I'm not a babyface or a heel. I am who I am. And if you remember, from day one, the very first matches that he was doing, he was cheered as the babyface because everybody loved him, and they wanted to do the thing with
the Ring of Honor thing.
Kenny Omega. But the reality is, from day one, he wrestled like a fucking heel. Like, he had a total heel style in the ring, beating the shit out of these guys and torturing them and et cetera, et cetera. And really, nothing has changed about the way he's been working. He's now feuding with a babyface group. He is now feuding with Hangman Page. But with the exception of cutting a promo on the fans that are already booing him, I mean, he's really not made a major change to his own character.
I think bragging about kicking someone's fucking head in is heel. Where doing the I have 5 referee is a nostalgia pop from a fun thing he did at Ring of Honor, which is still technically allowed and legal. He wasn't breaking any rules. He was playing up to the limit, and the commentators were playing it off as well. He is right. He's just being smart. I just think they've changed the way they've perceived him, and for whatever reason. And again, to me, when there is a heated issue, stopping from beating up the person you hate to pose ruins the heat of the emotion, heat of the moment.
I'm also not sure that Bryan is just going to go there and lose to the Hangman and then be a babyface again. I mean, he may just be a heel from this point forward. I'm pretty sure that he wanted to be a heel when he came in. I think if he had his way, he would come in and do this whole story regularly where he gets a bunch of wins as a heel, and then he puts over one of the young baby faces. I think if he had his way, he'd lose every single match, but I don't think they'd let him do that.
But I do, and I've always said this, I do not believe in swimming upstream, and whether he wants to be a heel or not, if the crowd loves him and wants to cheer him, I would keep him in that role because we're trying to make the paying customers happy, not the performers that we pay.
All right, Lance, let's get some plugs in here.
All right. I will have to remember I had a listener on Twitter wanted me to put a dream card together with people I've trained in the business, and I did the homework, so we will prepare it for next week. But plugs, follow me on Twitter at Lance Storm. I'm on Instagram at Storm Wrestling Academy. And again, I think the Black Friday sale's over, but I always have t-shirts at prowrestlingtees.com/Lance Storm. Virtual coaching, to be perfectly honest, at this point in time, I got a couple I'm catching up with, and dealing with my wife is a bigger priority, so I won't plug that this week.
All right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up for today. Lance is here every Friday at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, as long as things don't change. 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, and you can check out at Lance Storm on Twitter, and all the archives at WrestlingObserver.com as well, video.f4wonline.com. Thanks to all of our top-tier YouTube subscribers. We'll talk to you next time.
Adios.